can you confirm that it was as a result of waterboarding that we learned what we needed to learn to go after bin Laden?
You know, Brian, in the intelligence business, you work from a lot of sources of information, and that was true here. We had a multiple series of sources that provided information with regards to this situation. Clearly, some of it came from detainees and the interrogation of detainees, but we also had information from other sources as well, from Signet Intelligence, from imagery, from other sources that we had assets on the ground. And it was a combination of all of that that ultimately we were able to put together that led us to that compound. So it's a little difficult to say it was due just to one source of information that we got.
CIA Director Leon Panetta saying today that there were multiple sources of intelligence that ultimately beat the path to Osama bin Laden. So at this point, and maybe forever after, it is hard to know exactly where the key information came from that led to him. That has not stopped people of competing ideological stripes from using this week's enormous news to support their own arguments that their way was the way that public enemy number one was brought to justice. People saying torture worked or torture didn't work at all. And while I am sympathetic to those arguments and have them all the time, how can anybody in any direction really know the connection of those arguments to the facts at this point? Malcolm Nance is a former master instructor and chief of training at the Navy's Survival, Evasion, Resistance and Escape School, the SEER School. Mr. Nance has testified in front of Congress that waterboarding is torture. He's experienced it himself. He's now a consultant on counterterrorism and terrorism intelligence for the U.S. government. He's also author of the book, An End to Al-Qaida, Destroying bin Laden's Jihad and Restoring America's Honor. Malcolm, it's nice to see you again. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's always a pleasure.
Let me just start by asking you how you felt when you heard.
Well, when I finally stopped screaming, because, you know, I witnessed the Pentagon attack. I was right across the river from it and watched the airplane fly right into the building. So it was very personal for me. But it's also spent 10 years taking up the time of thousands and thousands of U.S. service members and their families, and my family's had to suffer over this too. But we're very relieved that this one component of Al-Qaeda, we've finally put the nail in the coffin of Al-Qaeda, and now the infrastructure is going to come tumbling down, and we can see what else we can do.
You think that the infrastructure of Al-Qaeda was that bin Laden was so important as the linchpin, or is that based on the fact that we got intelligence from where we killed bin Laden?
Well, both of those things. First off, Osama bin Laden is the ideological glue to what Al-Qaeda believes. Al-Qaeda was not just the man. It was the entire infrastructure that he had built around his philosophy of creating a new Islamic caliphate, of taking over the Muslim world and then the world, and creating this clash of civilizations where Islam will defeat democracy. Well, not only was he overtaken by events recently in the Middle East with democracy throughout the Muslim world, which had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda, not one word of his philosophy was used in that, he's dead. And now his followers on, the hangers-on, the people who are under him, his lieutenants, they have to justify their very existence in an Islamic world that has proved that Islamic democracy does not need violence, doesn't need anything that he was offering at this point. And with that, U.S. intelligence found a treasure trove of everything that he practically owned, of whatever communications methodology he was using in there, whether it was human intelligence, just face-to-face communications, or whether he was keeping a diary or notes, or just had something in his Rolodex. We have it now, and the Al-Qaeda organization has no clue as to what we have.
Yeah, and in terms of, I mean, there will never be anything as big for us, probably, as killing bin Laden. But we are all sort of on the edge of our seats to see the way that U.S. forces are going to be able to exploit any intelligence that they got there. And as that moves forward, we're also left trying to figure out what it was that they exploited to get as far as they did. What do you make about the debate about whether or not enhanced interrogation techniques were key to getting this information that led to bin Laden?
Well, that's ridiculous. Okay, first off, this intelligence is fresh. This occurred 8 months ago, almost 9 months ago. What this really is, what you have seen, what the United States citizens and the world has seen now, you have seen pure analytical intelligence processes come together, and what Director Panetta was trying to say was multi-dimensional intelligence was fused together, and we put boxes around people. We got hints about who was important, who was not important. We got little bits of data, whether it came from an interrogation that was soft or probably an interrogation that was relatively fresh. And we had these names, and we sifted through every name in the Al-Qaeda Association book. And with that, we started processing each one and started putting surveillance on them, whether that came from the Pakistanis themselves, with people in their special branch following them around, 40, 50 guys following them from here to here to here to there, or whether it came from signals intelligence, or whether it came from geospatial intelligence, where we analyzed the terrain that they were moving on, or whether we actually had eyes on that person following them 24/7 using a satellite or a drone. A lot of resources came together in this operation, and once we put that box around these people, they had to move, and they had to move to where they were operating from, whether that was in the mountains, moving down into a town, and then moving to this compound. And once they started going in and out of this compound, each one of these nodes, each one of these residences, each one of these little places they visited, systems came down on them, and we analyzed them. And the imagery analysts, as you've probably heard, noticed there were very different characteristics of this residence inside of near the Pakistani military academy that were very similar to the type of compound that he had had in Afghanistan and around Peshawar. I'd been to his house in Jalalabad after the Tora Bora operation. Very similar compound, 5, 6 residences with inside it, very high walls, very austere conditions. But it was beautifully placed to be someplace that was close to a facility that no one would suspect. But Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had done the same thing. He put his safe house right next to the Rawalpindi Military Center. Abu Zubaydah, same thing. It was an operational profile. But once we determined who was coming into this little box, you could put surveillance assets on it and around it. Even if they had gone outside the box, you can look and see who's there and when they're out of there, when they're doing operations out of there. It's really, really pure, raw intelligence power that went in here. And great shout-out needs to go out to all the service members in the U.S., the Central Intelligence Agency, Defense Intelligence Agency, and all the military service intelligence elements.
Somebody who's been involved in the training of those folks and teaching us all about the training of those folks, a shout-out back to you. Malcolm Nance, former chief of training at the Navy's SEER School, an expert in counterterrorism and terrorism intelligence. I've been wanting to talk to you about this since I learned about it. Thanks for coming in, Malcolm.
My pleasure.
It's great to see you.